If you have barriers to learning and higher education in particular, there are ways to get around them. Elizabeth Bushnell with the Questa Education Foundation tells us how on the Midwest Flourish. Greetings, I'm Rick Farrant, and I'm your host for the Midwest Flourish. Our guest today is Dr. Elizabeth Bushnell, President and CEO of the Questa Education Foundation. Welcome, Liz.
Thanks. I appreciate the chance to be here.
And I should add that aside from being the leader of Questa, you have graciously been involved in just all kinds of initiatives that have to do with education, talent development, and that sort of thing. And you know, for me, in my sphere, you helped me a lot too. So I have to thank you for that. But regarding Questa, tell us a little bit about the foundation and what it does. It's a Fort Wayne foundation that serves what area? It
serves the 11 counties of Northeast Indiana. So we were based in Fort Wayne, but we kind of serve the whole Northeast Indiana footprint. And the Questa has been around actually for a long time. We started in 1937. Our whole focus is on helping students in our region to pursue further education after high school. We want students to graduate with as little debt as possible, and we're hoping to encourage graduates to come back to live and work in our region.
Right. And so some of the programs that you do are like forgivable loans. I guess not all of them are. But one of the, and I've known this for some time, but one of the things, where does the money come from that allows you to give forgivable loans?
That's the primary function of our work, is providing funding for students, and most of that's in forgivable loans. And the loan forgiveness works in really interesting ways because we help to fund students when they need it for their education, and they get debt forgiveness when they graduate and come back to our community. And we're funded through a variety of different sources. So we have support from companies locally who want to invest in talent. We get support from foundations who provide multi-year grants for Questa. We get individual donations, which is really significant for us. And students do pay back a portion of their loan. So some of what they repay, we will use then to fund future students. So it's always kind of paying it forward to the next class of students.
Right, but the money that people would give to you, they're not getting the money back, right? They're just saying, here's the money, and whatever you need it for your program, it's spent.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. There's no remuneration for the benevolent folks that give to the foundation.
No, it's a contribution to support students and to support talent development for our community.
So the timing for this it won't run tomorrow, but when it runs, but it's kind of good. It's fortuitous because you're now on a scholar application process for the traditional program, and we'll talk about some of the other programs. But how do people apply, and what are the parameters for getting a loan under that program with Questa?
That program is designed for our students who are just graduating high school this year. And if they're going directly into further education after high school, they can apply for loan funding. You just apply through our website. It's questafoundation.org. There's some details there about all of our different programs, but specifically for high school students, we're looking for students. They can be in any major. If they're interested in attending a nonprofit accredited college in Indiana, that's one of our specifications. Students need a GPA of 2.5 or greater. We want them to share our goals. We want them to have an intent and interest in living and working in the region after they graduate. And then we also consider financial gap. So Questa is designed, it's not going to cover the full expense for students, but we're looking at what's a student's cost of college, what other aid do they have, what can they afford to contribute, and what's left, what's the gap, and how do we help make that up. So we fund a lot of low income and a lot of middle income students who can afford some, but they can't afford everything.
Yeah, and 2.5 is not necessarily a high bar. How did you arrive at 2.5 being the cutoff point?
Well,
2.5 is okay. They're doing okay, but we're not talking about, 3s and 4s here.
Yeah, we want to make sure that students indicate they can be successful in further education, but we also want to be inclusive of all students and all different majors and aptitudes. And so we think that's we've seen in our data and the history of our program, that's a good minimum that students demonstrate they're ready for further education after high school. That they can be successful. And it is a competitive process. We can't fund everybody who applies. And so students, GPA, their activities, their work experience, their recommendations, all of that factors into who gets selected.
And one thing you didn't mention there was their financial situation. Mm-hmm. And what you just said you did, is that not a barrier in determining which kids get it and which kids don't, or is it these other things?
It is. It's all of it. So it is a factor. We're looking at students who need the Questa program. There's some students who may be able to afford out of pocket all of their expenses, and so that Questa is not really a need for those students. We are looking at students who have a financial gap where they maybe have some that they can afford to pay for college, but they can't afford everything, and so we're trying to help make up that difference for students.
Yeah, and would a student know ahead of time when it comes to finances? Would they be able to know ahead of time, oh, I'm going to qualify or I'm not going to qualify? I mean, they obviously know about the 2.5 and they know about some of these others, but on the financial side, would they know whether it was worth their time to apply?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's not a set cutoff. So we can't tell students, like, if you make this much or your student aid index is X number, you will definitely get in or out. But typically we can give students a sense, like if you have an SAI, which is student aid index of $20,000 or less, you're going to be really competitive for Questa. We do fund students with an SAI that may be much higher than that, and it'll depend on other factors. So we have specific funding buckets for particular students from counties or particular majors, and so if they're the best qualified candidates in those buckets, they could get selected. And so financial part of it is one consideration in selecting students, but it's not the only consideration.
And I'm going to assume that you would not discourage, if a student feels like they might qualify, you're not going to discourage them and say don't because you have a question as to whether you do or not.
Right. We always want students to apply. And if they have any questions, that's one of the nice things about being a local nonprofit organization that's here to help students. They can call us, they can email us, they can talk to us about their application. We'll give them a sense of, if there's somebody who's not qualified and they're not going to get selected because they don't have the financial need or they don't meet our criteria in some way, we'll let students know. And then we can also direct them to other resources. And I know we'll talk a little bit about it, but we have a scholarship database to help students find other local aid.
Yeah, we are going to get into that. But you've also got you've got a couple of other programs, I think, that you're working on, as well as some that already exist. Let's talk about those for a little bit.
Right. Thanks for the opportunity, because we have a lot of different programs to help students. So we were just talking about traditional, which is for our graduating high school seniors. But we have other forgivable loan programs. One's called our Contemporary program, and that's for students who may be currently enrolled in college, or they might be adult learners in our community that are interested in pursuing further education. That's open year-round, and students can apply anytime. We also have what we call our Career Scholars program, which is also forgivable loan, but it's where we're partnering with local employers. They're helping us fund students who they ultimately want to hire. And those loans are 100% forgiven when students graduate if they go to work for that partnering employer.
Okay, so they're already working. The employer is providing some of the support, right, for the forgivable loan, and I'm kind of curious about this too. What are are there parameters for that too? I mean, like, does it have to do how are they doing on their job? You know, you got the 2.5 for the high school students. What does the person who's already in the workforce need to demonstrate?
Yeah, great question. And actually, those programs are a mix. Some of them are for students who are not currently working but want to work at our employer partner. So they might be a full-time student, and often they have to be in the right major, express interest in that employer, have a certain GPA sometimes. It kind of varies program to program. Some of those programs are for current employees, and then a lot of times it's based on recommendation of the employer.
Okay. I would suspect it. Okay, so now what I want to know is, what has the response been to Questa? I actually remember maybe 10 years ago was the first time I heard of Questa. I guess I'm not that educated about everything. Had no idea what it was, and I just got the sense that maybe there weren't a lot or enough people who knew about the program. What has the demand been, say, recently?
We do get a lot of applications. We get more applications than we can fund, but we are also always working on awareness. And so it's kind of this double-edged sword. We want to make sure we're promoting heavily, making sure that the students and families who most need us hear about Questa. And so that's one of the things we're always cognizant of, is I'll occasionally hear from people in the community, oh, I wish I'd known about that when I was in school. And me too. I wish they'd known about it, because we need to do a good job to make sure students know that we're a good resource. We do get more applications than we can fund in many of our programs, mainly traditional, some in contemporary. And part of our goal as an organization is to increase our resources and to grow so that we can fund as many qualified students as possible. And we have grown year over year. We have more than doubled the number of students we're funding since about 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay. Interesting. And there is always that problem. I know there's that problem with a lot of, I would say educational programs where you want to get people into the programs, but do you have the resources to actually serve people if you go crazy on promoting it, right?
Right.
Yeah. So there is a balance to that. And I think some of the things that you have are, you're working on a Compass Fund Finder, as well as a Questa Compass Directory. I had to look that up just to make sure I was saying it properly. These are all part of a new Learn More, Earn More initiative, right?
They are, yes.
And one of them's up and one of them's not. Is that correct? I mean, is that the status of those two right now? And what are they?
Yeah, so these are resources and other ways that we're aiming to help students. So obviously, the bulk of our work at Cuesta is funding students directly. But even if we're not able to fund them through a Cuesta program, there are so many local scholarship and financial aid opportunities that could be a possibility for students. So one of those tools you mentioned, the Compass Fund Finder, is a scholarship search tool, essentially. It'll help students to find local aid. It can help them to create a profile. They can track deadlines. They can favorite things that are a good match for them. So it's a kind of a cool tool to be able to connect to other aid opportunities, which could be including in addition to Cuesta, or if you weren't selected for Cuesta funding, it's a great way to find other resources.
Yeah, and that will be an online tool, right?
Correct.
And then what is the other one that I mentioned, which I think...
So the Compass Fund Finder is the specifically financial aid, and then it's part of a bigger umbrella that we're calling Cuesta Compass, which will be a directory of other resources that students might need to pursue further education. So if students need help exploring careers and thinking about what do they want to major in, there are a lot of great programs in our community where students can go do career exploration, or they can get experience or internships. So that directory will have all of those different categories: career exploration, looking at academic help if a student needs that, personal help if students need childcare or transportation support or other resources to make further education possible. The directory will be a way for students to find those things, as well as for advocates and supporters who may be working with a student. It might be a high school counselor and a student needs XYZ. They could use Compass as a way to find out some of those local opportunities.
And what's your timeline for launching these?
We're going to have the Compass Fund Finder will be live within the week, so that students can be using that. Our early version is accessible now through our Cuesta website. And then the overall directory, we will have a pilot of that available this spring as well in a couple of months.
Yeah, and I've asked you this question before. How are you going to keep this sucker up to date, both of these? Which it seems to me is one thing to start something like that, which is a huge lift. Mm-hmm. But then it requires keeping it updated. You know, you may have some resources and programs that fall away. You may have new ones that crop up. What's your plan for making this current?
A couple things, because we're going to need a good strategy for that. It's an important need. One is going to be staff time. We will have staff who are dedicated to working on these resources. Another is going to be collaboration across the community. So we're planning to form a Compass committee where we've got regional representation from all of our counties, and folks who can help not only promote that the directory exists, but also make sure that we're getting current updates and information. We'll also use technology. So ultimately, as we evolve the tool, we'll have a way for it to alert us when there's broken links or information that's out of date to make sure that we're current.
Yeah. Well, I wish you much luck on that. It's a huge. What's been your biggest challenge in developing those two tools?
I would say it's really been time. I think there's a lot of enthusiasm for people to support us and to make these resources available. I think it's just a matter of time because this is building a new program for Cuesta in addition to our funding programs. So just making sure that we can pursue it and get it live and be timely in providing information to the community.
Yeah, you know, sometimes when an organization sort of expands into doing some other things, there can be criticism that you can say, what is that organization doing? Is it trying to solve the whole world? Tell me about your thinking in this, because it is an expansion of your role. Tell me about your thinking in expanding into other ways of encouraging people to go to post-secondary education.
Well, for us, it's very central to our mission. Our mission is to help individuals pursue further education, graduate with less debt, and become part of our workforce and community after they complete. And the Compass directory is going to hit on all of those by helping students to remove barriers, make further education possible, connect them to financial aid and scholarship opportunities, connect them to career connections in our community. All of that's central to what we're trying to accomplish. I think one of the things that makes this feasible for us, this type of expansion, is that we're not doing it by ourselves. This is part of a bigger effort, like you mentioned, the Learn More, Earn More initiative. So it's one piece of several strategies to help students.
Yeah. And what is the Learn More, Earn More initiative? Which you've been heavily involved in, not just in developing these tools, but just in discussions, these community-wide discussions about the initiative. What is it exactly, and what's the goal of it?
So it's a regional collaboration, is the way I'd best describe it, focused on helping individuals in our community achieve further education after high school and meet talent needs in our region. And it initially started as a partnership between Questa and the Don Wood Foundation, actually several years ago, doing some research and figuring out what are those talent needs and what are the obstacles preventing students from pursuing further education. But it has evolved into a community effort where we've had stakeholders across Northeast Indiana involved in planning, and then multiple organizations involved in this implementation stage of what can we do that will make a difference for more students.
Yeah. I know you to be an extraordinarily optimistic person most of the time. But here we are. We have some colleges that are struggling with enrollment. We seem to have a fair number of people out there that are beginning to question the value of a college education, whether it's a 2-year degree or 4-year degree. We also have a lot of people who, support short-term certifications as an option to college. What makes you think that those sorts of attitudes or moving in that direction can be turned around, at least to the point where people are maybe a little more readily accepted that a college education is worthwhile?
I think it has to do with
there's the money thing too, which Questa tries to address with his stuff. But you have a lot of people say, well, I don't want to spend the money, and I don't think that the ROI that I'm going to get is really going to be worth much.
Yeah. I think that a key part of this initiative is messaging and how we talk about further education and why it's important and how it connects to career opportunities and what's the return on investment for people to pursue further education, and to talk about it more inclusively, to not get into narrow assumptions or definitions of college means this, and it's going to be full-time on campus 4 years, and everybody should do that. We're really talking about all types of education after high school, why it's important, how it can be valuable for individuals, and it really embracing that people pursue what's best for them. There's not one size fits all, and all varied types of education are important. So I think the messaging is part of it. I also think that it's the resources. Having done the research and the conversations that we've done to understand what's holding students back, I think we've got some great initiatives going that will reduce barriers and help connect students to resources and overcome things that might be holding them back.
Right, and I'm glad you brought up messaging. And some of what's holding them back is messaging, but also maybe some preconceived notions of various things. What have you discovered that, you have the barriers, you have transportation, you have childcare, you have those physical kinds of barriers. What are some of the philosophical barriers that you have discovered that prevent some people from considering a college education?
I think there's a lot there, but I would say some of the top things are, as I mentioned, sometimes people assume post-secondary education or college means one thing, and that's not a fit for them. And in reality, there's a lot of different pathways to pursue further education and get a certificate or get a certification or a degree. And there's really a path for anybody. It's just figuring out what is the right path for that individual. I think One of the other barriers you mentioned is that hesitancy as to whether the cost is worth it. And I think that's a really important thing that we need to talk about in messaging is showing how it's worth it and how making good choices makes that cost less, and that you can pursue further education with financial help, you can minimize debt, and you can get a lot of return on that investment. But we have to show people how that works.
Yeah, and what would you say to somebody, because I know that there are a lot of young people who, it's kind of like the instant gratification thing. There are a lot of young people that think, well, I want to go out and I want to make money now and I can do it this way and I don't have to go to college, and what would you say to, I mean, maybe that is the right thing for them to do for a variety of reasons, but what would you say to somebody who sort of had the attitude is, I don't want to put in 2 years or 4 years. I can actually get this certificate, right? This to me is, like you say, it's not one size fits all, but there's a little friction there in the messaging on both ends, right? There's the messaging that you can avoid college debt, you don't have to go to school for 4 years, you can get the certification, you can go in and get a job, and you can make a decent living. So there's some friction between the messaging on both sides of this. What would you say to somebody who said, don't need it?
Mm-hmm. I would say you don't have to decide to do that now. I think the key thing that we're trying to get across is that learning can happen anytime and at any point in your career. And that might be the exactly right choice for that young person, is to graduate from high school, go get a certification and start working. And then there's opportunity to build on that at any point. So that certification may be something that gets the student their start. And in 5 years, they want to go on and get additional education because it's going to be the next step in their career. Or they want to change careers altogether. So I think that it's important to think about, it's not a one-time decision. It's lifelong learning opportunities, and that's at any time that it's important for that individual.
And what about the person that doesn't think they're smart enough? Right now we're dealing with some really psychological issues that sometimes prevent people from getting ahead when it comes to education. And while 2.5 is passing, there may be some people in that category that think, yeah, but I'm not smart. I don't get lots of A's. I'm a BC student, and they're not really making the decision about college based on what they want to do as a career. There's some insecurities. What do we do about those that feel kind of insecure about elevating their education?
I really think that goes back to finding the right path for the individual. I think that there are so many different opportunities for further education and lots of careers that connect to it. And I think individuals need to do some self-exploration to figure out, what do I want to do and what's a good fit for me? What's my aptitude? Where am I most successful? What do I enjoy the most? And then recognize education isn't always the traditional setting that people are used to. It's not always sit in a classroom and listen to a lecture and take notes, and you have to be the A student in order to succeed in that. So much of further education is hands-on. It's learning through experience and actually doing the job or doing projects that have real-world application. I think there's so many paths to education that people can find the fit in the way that they excel. And that's one of those myths we kind of have to address, is that it's not all traditional. You have to be an A student, sit in a classroom, and do it one way. It's a matter of finding career-wise what's the right fit for you, and then how does education match with that, and what path is going to be the one where you're most successful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. My guess is you have some success stories, excuse me, with Questa. You don't have to name names, but perhaps you could give several examples of cases of success.
I'd love to. Overall, our program's really incredible in the impact that it makes for students individually. But as a whole, we have an over 85% graduation rate where students are incredibly successful in completing their academic programs, whether it's a certificate or a degree or a graduate degree. Over 82% of our students come back to Northeast Indiana to live and work. So those are two statistics we always love to share because those are big successes for Cuesta scholars as a whole.
Well, but the 82%, they have to come back.
to earn.
In order to satisfy the loan they have.
They do,
Okay,
yeah.
so they have to come back.
They can choose not to, but then they repay the loan. So
well,
we have a little incentive in there for them to come back.
Well, what would you attribute the graduation rate to? Because it's not just about money. So if you take a certain population, you have a good graduation rate. What would you attribute that to? Does Cuesta stay? I assume you stay in contact with the students. Does Cuesta? I'm not being critical, but does it in any way encourage students along their educational journey?
We do. That's, I think, part of what makes Questa Scholars successful is they are not just getting a check sent to their school and they never hear from us again. We check in with students every single semester, and we're checking on their progress. If a student's struggling, then we're figuring out how do we connect them to the right resources so that they can get back on track. I think that's a big part of why the graduation rate is as high as it is. And we do. You asked about kind of individual stories. I was giving you some statistics, but we hear anecdotally and get to talk to students through those conversations to hear the impact that Cuesta makes for them. We have a student who's actually serves as a representative on our board, a student representative, who is from a single-parent household, was not going to be able to afford college and the desired degree path that she wanted to pursue. And Cuesta was the difference for her to be able to go to college. And then she's such a huge advocate for it. Now she tells everybody she knows about Cuesta and how it makes an impact. And is an incredibly hardworking student to the point where she's in her senior year. She has gotten so much great internship experience, part-time jobs. She's now not needing Cuesta funding because she has earned enough money to pay for college herself, which is incredible.
Yeah, that's a great goal. I wanted to get to this in our last, whatever it is, couple of minutes. I would be very interested to hear about your educational journey because you have a doctorate. Mm-hmm. So obviously you have expanded your learning through the years, and you might be, if I didn't know you so well, you might be one of those sort of snooty people that walks around flashing their doctorate in people's faces. What led you to your educational journey?
I'm one of those people who loved school and still love school. So I kind of am a perpetual student. I love to learn. So there was no special messaging needed to convince me to go on and continue education. But I will say that I've worked in higher education for most of my career. And one of the motivations for me to get my doctorate is in higher education leadership, was because I can see firsthand, and I have throughout the decades that I've worked in higher ed, how education is really life-changing for people. And to be able to be an educator and to help support people in that journey, whatever that education path looks like for them, is really important to me. It's something I'm really passionate about. It's why I love what we do at Cuesta. It's why I continue to study education and figure out how to help more people engage in the system and make it work for them, because I think it's really meaningful in people's lives.
Well, what was it when you were younger? And you can pick a time. You said you've always loved education. You've always loved learning. Was there any particular person or circumstance or thing that set you off on this learning journey?
As a young person, I would say it was reading, and I would say it was my local library. Honestly, my family is big readers. I loved going to the library as a kid and being able to explore and learn. That was my first job when I was a teenager, was working at the library, reshelving books. And so I think that's always been a passion and a pathway for me.
Yeah. So there wasn't one person of influence or one thing. It was just, as far as you can recall, it just was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say. I will say somebody who very influential in my career was Dr. Jo Young Switzer, who was the president of Manchester University when I worked there for a number of years. She was somebody who has always been a role model for me of how to be a good leader, why education is important, how to communicate effectively. So I've certainly had a lot of mentors and role models like that, but Dr. Switzer was one of the best.
Well, it's been a wonderful conversation. Loved having you. Appreciate it.
Great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the chance to be here.
Quite welcome. Thank you.
That's a wrap on today's episode of the Midwest Flourish podcast. Want to dig deeper or get involved? Head to marketingthemidwest.com to explore how we can work together to empower your community to flourish. Let's keep the Midwest momentum going and shape the future of our region together.